Welcome to Salon Talks. I am Mary Elizabeth Williams, and this icon is Margaret Cho. She is a Grammy and Emmy nominated actor, comedian, author, musician, and activist. You've seen her on The Flight Attendant, The Masked Singer, Drop Dead Diva, The Cho Show, numerous stand up specials, loads of other places. This year, she was part of three GLAAD Award nominated projects, including my favorite film of 2022, Margaret, Fire Island. You
Oh,
can
I love
I
it.
love that movie so much.
I know,
Like,
it's so beautiful.
Suck It, Banshees of Inisherin. That was my favorite movie. You can currently see Margaret live across the country on her new tour, except in New York. What have you got against New York, Margaret?
Actually coming. It hasn't been announced yet officially because they're trying to work things out. But yes, I am coming.
I was going to do 20 minutes on Why Do You Hate New York? The tour is
No.
called Live and Livid. Hi, Margaret. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you. How wonderful. Thank you so much.
Margaret, so this is your first tour in, I believe, 6 years, getting back on the road. It's called Live and Livid. There's a lot to be livid about. Tell me about this tour and what you wanted to bring to it this time.
Well, I think that it's really uh, for me it's a return to live performance. I've taken a lot of time to um just be safe. The pandemic really I think was so much longer than we all anticipated, but it really took a lot of the ability to perform live, to go see live shows, which I do all the time. It's sort of a reset, but I feel like now, I'm just so grateful to be going out there and at a time where trans rights, gay rights, women's rights, Asian hate crimes at such a huge high. It's like a very challenging time to even look for reasons to feel good about what's happening in the world. And then on top of that, climate change, of course. Such a such an all these things, it's a storm of hatred, it's a storm of fear, but I think the way to combat that is with humor, which I think is a healing force. It's the force of optimism, really, and but most importantly, it's a way to be able to get together and celebrate the fact that we can be together.
I love that. And yet the word livid doesn't, like, it's you're definitely starting. You're not, it's like live and feeling good. It's like we're all kind of mad about a lot of stuff right now. I saw you recently just signed that open letter to the New York Times about their anti-trans coverage, or their, let's just call it anti-trans coverage. Tell me a little bit about that. About these are issues that you have been involved with and been vocal about for the 4 decades of your career. Tell me what you're seeing now that's such a, you and I are the same age. It's like it's such a unique moment in history.
It is a unique moment because we've really seen the rise of Christian extremism that is so disgusting. Like it's a really like painful realization that as a progressive, I've really let my guard down. I let my guard down so much over the last 50 years of being a progressive, that um, things were going to be fair, that democracy worked in a fair way, that equality was a given. And all of these things just seem to be taken away little by little. They chip away at it little by little. And then suddenly we have these things like the Don't Say Gay bill or the anti woke. Like, to me, it's such a strange thing to be against. Like, why are you against progress? Why are you against teaching children real history, real American history? What we can learn from critical race theory really has more to do with um, the resilience of the idea of equality, the resilience of the idea of democracy. But we're losing all this in this uh, presumed fear of white erasure, which I think we need to change. We need to move forward. We need to have inclusion. We need to have the idea of intersectionality all across everything. But this weird, I don't know, theological bent to politics has become very upsetting.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you said, it's this white fragility, but it's also straight fragility. It's also
Mhm.
masculine fragility, right? I
I know
mean,
they're supposed to be strong. If like you're gonna be a man, take it like a man. Take it like a man. Take equal rights like a man.
right? It seems like, what are you so threatened about? And when you're looking at these things like actual agendas against like drag reading hours.
Okay, there's so many things wrong with it. First of all, you're traumatizing children. You're bringing firearms to children's events, which in the weird deluded idea that you're protecting the children, that, and this is all in the sort of spirit of protecting children, literally traumatizing children for reading. So you would rather us not have education? We should not have literature. The banning, it goes with the banning of books. It goes with this idea that somehow drag queens are any in any way harmful to children. If we want to look at what's harmful to children, let's look at the Catholic Church. Let's look at these institutions that have protected predators for centuries. So it's pretty clear who the predators are. It's not drag queens. It's not trans people. Um, Yet we're doing so much to fight this hypocrisy and this bizarre delusion that we're not actually able to change what's wrong.
And the thing I think about the drag reading hours that strikes me so deeply, Margaret, is that it's also anti-joy, it's
Mhm,
anti-fun. And
mhm.
you talking about that in your comedy, and that this tour is really about that too, is about coming together and being able to laugh, being able to share, having something that's a positive experience. I wonder, especially coming out and doing this after so many years, is there apprehension about doing this? Is there fear? You talk about hate crimes. I know you've said there have been times where you have felt afraid to leave your house because of the rise in anti-Asian violence. What are you thinking about as you start doing this?
I have legitimate fear, but that doesn't mean that you can't go out there and do what's right. I have legitimate fears as an older Asian American woman. I'm a prime target for any of this kind of um, bigotry, any of these hate crimes happening. But I still have to, be out there, being queer and being progressive, being a feminist. All of these things are really more important to me to protect than it is my own anxiety. I don't want to nurture my own personal anxiety and let the sort of things that are happening keep going. I think they should be afraid. They should be afraid for spouting these hateful views. But drag is really where, as the queer community, we celebrate our joy and our victory. It's a very calculated effort to dismantle our humanity by taking away the things that we love the most, things that are so treasured, like drag, because it's where we have been able to laugh at sort of mainstream society and become superior in that joy and laughter, to find a way to lift ourselves up. So, drag, camp, trans lives, all these places are where we celebrate our wins in a very deep and profound way. So, to have those under attack, it's alarming.
Yeah, because it is attack not just on history, on identity. It's an attack on joy,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's really deep. When you talk about being an older, well, I mean, we're both the same age, so how older are we really? Not too old, right?
No,
But
no, I think that, life begins at 60, so I'll be
okay.
born in about 6 years.
I'm
So,
excited.
yes.
Happy preemptive birthday. But I love that, you have, it's so clear to me as a parent and as a fan of yours, the way that you are also taking on younger generations, that you seem to really be embracing this role as a role model, and as a mentor and a guide to younger people coming up. And I see what impact you have on them and the positive message that you give about anti-bullying and about identity. And I want to know what you're learning from them as a comedian who has to always be evolving, always changing. What are you learning from them about the way you do your comedy, or the issues that you focus on, or the language that you use even?
Oh, I'm a student, really. I'm a student of all the things that young people are doing. Gen Z are they are the generation that's going to save our planet, and they're doing amazing. If you look at Greta Thunberg and you look at all of these young influencers on TikTok, they're just so incredible. The way that they are identity forward. They are proud. They are all very so so much about, like, embracing the nuance and embracing the nuance of identity in a way that's broad and specific. So, I'm really a student of all of these people who really have grown up with the internet, and they've grown up with the activism on the internet, and they know so much more than I could even, hope to know about what like, I've lived experience, but I don't have the specific experience of having technology there from the beginning, and so they're really inspiring to me.
When you talk about that and you talk about the nuance, I was thinking about like that dumb Pamela Paul article in the New York Times, and this other one she wrote a few months ago about let's do away with the word queer. Like I don't know what queer ever did to you, Pamela Paul, but that kind of nuance of language. I've been watching you for so long, and I know you have been one of those people who has talked a lot about bisexuality and the fight for bisexual identity and the ways in which bisexuals have been sometimes marginalized, both in the gay community and in the straight community. And now I know you've been talking about the spectrum of gender identity. And I wonder where you see yourself now and where you see yourself evolving in your own identity.
Well, I think bisexuality is a limiting term because it's also really just denotes that there may only be two genders. Like, it puts us in a binary, which I think it's not exactly right, but it's a word that we have. And I just appreciate so much the idea of neopronouns and how we're embracing them. And that's, to me, a real step forward in identity. Like, let's get more nuanced about how we use words within the scope of identity. And that's why the right really fight against, like, "Oh, my pronouns are USA." Those are not pronouns. That is an acronym. You cannot take articles of language and make them into things that they are not, just because you want to prove a point about your patriotism. Like, if you really want to, like, talk about that, like, they're just trying to take away the idea of, like, we can't be nuanced about our identity. Within that nuance there is so much strength and power, so I really appreciate that. My own identity actually has been really altered, I think, by menopause. So now I feel like more an ace, which is new, asexual, a polyamorous asexual, which I think is really to be the perfect thing to be.
I love it, right? Because I remember I read something you said recently about that women, our whole deep fear in life is like it's supposed to be about dying alone, and how you would actually be pretty psyched to die alone.
Oh, that's the thing that I'm hoping for, and I have a whole bunch of cats to prove it. Like, I love this idea of, like, crazy cat lady as archetype, and it shouldn't have to be a negative thing. Like, why is spinster somehow negative? I really think it's great. We are able to step into our own power and not have to negotiate our life with anybody else. That's, to me, the greatest happiness.
Margaret, I know one of your big role models and influences was Joan Rivers. And I wonder if some of that attitude also comes from what you've seen from her. I know she said something to you that you loved about kind of how comedians get to grow older and you get to evolve, and the world lets you change and lets you age in a way that it doesn't necessarily for everybody else. But I wonder if that's just true for women, because I got to tell you, I look at some of the older male comedians and I don't see them embracing it in quite the same way.
I know. I think it's I don't know. I think it's hard because male comedians always are trying to prove themselves as being, we're not just funny, we're also virile, we're also like um powerful, we're also smart, and we're also right. Male comedians have this love affair with being right about everything. Like, it's a really strange thing. Like you cannot bring in sort of like any idea of debate with them because they want to have the final word. As well as I sort of feel more fluid with my opinions in general. Of course, I'm never going to like ever be a pro-life trad wife. Like I know that. But everything else I can somehow negotiate another opinion in general. And I also can, admit to when I'm wrong. But a lot of male comedians have had problems with that. Also, with aging, they get very defensive about things, I think. So it's tough.
Yeah, and I think maybe for a woman and a woman in comedy, being able to kind of step back from being judged and assessed purely on how sexy you are or how much someone wants to go to bed with you is then free. It gives you a place to be listened to, maybe.
Yeah, and it also gives you like a space of just being free of all that. Like I think to not have to wonder whether I'm sort of presenting femininity in a way that's consumable as femininity. Like it's a weird, I don't know, it's a weird thing. Like I think women in comedy have always had sort of like been saddled with the idea of like femininity as a kind of a negative. In general, if you sort of presented more masculine, there was an idea where people would just assume that you were funnier, oddly. I don't know why it has to be so gendered because funny is funny. To me, it's very hard for anybody to be funny, especially in the scope of like stand-up comedy. It's quite a strangely naked art form. So it's hard to even figure out how to do that without putting all of the gendered meaning on top of the archetype of who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, and yet, when you say that, it's like, I know you've said that this is all you ever were gonna do, that you never had any other path but this. And, you're coming out of this community, this environment, this world where as an Asian woman, that's not necessarily the first thing that's expected of you. And you're coming out of San Francisco, this time, particularly where it was ground zero of a crisis that was also that was particularly targeting the queer community. And I wonder, how has that impacted you going through your life, that beginning in that time and place in history, looking at your activism and looking at the front and center role that has played throughout your career?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so fiercely protective of drag is because drag is really the way that we were able to heal from the AIDS pandemic, which was like our first pandemic. Drag was a way that we could make sense of our tragedy and find the hope to laugh again. Even if it was in very dark, humorous ways, we would have to embrace that gallows humor because we were surrounded by death daily, multiple times daily. And so drag is such a fiercely important part of our culture because it gives us the means to survive. It's a powerful tool. Humor is a powerful tool for awakening and for healing.
Yeah, and survival, just
Yeah.
straight up survival. When I think about that and I think about as someone who's been watching you for decades, you have evolved as a comedian and I can see it, but I wonder how you see it. Are there things in your past, jokes that you did or subject matter that you took on that maybe you feel like you wouldn't now? You are so open about trauma, about rehab, about substance abuse, about mental health issues. Are there things that you look back at now and you say, I wouldn't talk about them that way, or I would talk about them differently?
I think that what I learned is that everything is good for art. All of those subjects, even though they're difficult, they are really good for connecting with others on a very human level. I think we're all very vulnerable to different kinds of pain. And so when you can take that pain and turn it into something that is really funny and really tragic in the way that it's funny, I feel like it's incredibly cathartic. So I don't think that those kinds of things are anything that I would regret. I don't really regret it. I regret some of the outfits, but then I might like them again. So I'm not really sure. Like sometimes I look at clothes and I'm like, I don't know. I remember one time uh, in the 90s, we were doing television shows, and myself, Ginny Garofalo, and Karen Kilgariff, we could only afford to buy one dress. So we split it. We each wore it. We had our own twist on it. It was like some kind of weird silver silk moire. I don't even know why it was so strange, but I mean, I think that I'm just grateful that we can. I mean, they can afford their own dress. I can afford my own dress. I wouldn't wear a dress. Some of the dresses, some of the outfit choices, but then of course I'll go back and I'll say I like it.
I know exactly the dress you're talking about, Margaret.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
exactly that dress because I saw all 3 of you on it.
Yeah, incredible. Isn't that funny that we all had the same dress? But everybody's doing well now, so it's different.
Everybody's doing okay. Well, so let me ask you about how you're doing right now. How are you doing? You've come out of a pandemic. You spent a long time in rehab. How are you now? What is getting you through? Because you talk about trauma. Trauma doesn't go away. How do you deal with those issues, those demons, those dark days now?
Well, I have had a long time problem with depression, which now is really alleviated because I have a very strong meditation practice, which takes about gosh, it takes a long time. Like there's a lot that I do to maintain my mental health that is not I think there's a lot of wonderful drug therapies out there, but I don't do any of that because I have so many problems in that area. So now I have a very strong meditation practice. I have hundreds of houseplants. Some are dying. There's a storm. They're outside right now. There's a storm coming. They're going to get overwatered. And so I deal with it when I can. My cactus garden is flourishing, however, but everything else is kind of a little bit it's a little tricky. I have many cats. I have a dog who's actually right at my lumbar right now. She's my lumbar cushion. She's the best. I have an enormously satisfying artistic life. So I just spend my days creating and making a big pot of a bolognese in the other room, in the kitchen, not the other room. Um, I've like been able to train my cats not to use one side of the counter. They have the rest of the counter, but I have one little sliver I can do my cooking, and they will not go there. So I use that little sliver of counter as my base for creating. So I
That's
do a
your
lot of creating and cooking.
that's your mental health space, is that little sliver of the
They've
kitchen.
allowed they've allowed me one little space in the kitchen where I can just do my cooking right there just because they know because I cook for them, and
So, well, cats are geniuses, so they
they're
know. They know
so
that there's a
genius.
they know that there's a payoff for them. I can't let you go without asking you about Fire Island because I loved it so much.
Thank
You
you.
wanted to do this movie before you even saw a script.
Oh, yeah. As soon as I saw that Joel Kim Booster had written it, that Bowen Yang was the star, and that Andrew Ahn was directing, I was like, "Oh, I'm in this. I don't know if you know, but I'm in this film." And I just strong-armed my way into the movie. The part that I played was originally written for a man, and as luck would have it, it just kind of worked out, and I loved making it. Hopefully, we get to do a sequel or a prequel, or you make a whole cinematic universe. I think that would be really great.
I've heard about that. I've heard that the next dream is to get Marissa Tomei on board.
She must. She's so fabulous. And yeah, I think it would just be a really special film. I would love to incorporate all of the places that we go as queers, whether that is uh, like Fire Island, Provincetown. You know, there's Byron Bay, there's Whistler, BC, there's Palm Springs. There's so many great locations for that sort of idea of the queer paradise.
Fire Island 2, Provincetown. It's
Yes,
got a ring to it, I think.
I agree.
Okay. But in the meantime, before Fire Island 2, Provincetown, Here We Come Again, starring Marissa Tomei, we can see you on tour. We can even see you if we live in New York City, apparently. So
Yes,
great
yes.
news, Margaret. Margaret Cho, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited that we can see you live and livid right now. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.